This is a video evaluation of my stop-motion production. So the brief that I chose for my production was the 30-second stop-motion pilot episode for a children's TV programme. The original content required was for the theme to be educational, with an inspiring main character and a target audience of 3 to 8 year olds. Other elements that the brief specified were to have a soundtrack specifically made for the production, a narrative suited to under 8 year olds, the inclusion of a narrator, a gender-neutral main character, and a location that would appeal to my target audience. As the producer, there are a few elements of the brief that I wanted to change so that I could have my own creativity to the production. So I negotiated with the commissioner of the brief and adapted a few requirements. The agreement we came to meant that the theme of the production was to promote moral values rather than be educational, for the soundtrack to be suitable for the production rather than specifically made, and for the main character to appeal to the male gender. So I decided to make my characters out of primary colour plasticine because I thought they would be appropriate for the age group. I made the location a school playground, as children in the age bracket would be able to relate to the location, as it sets up the moral value of anti-bullying in a place that they are likely to see it happening in real life. My main characters resemble people, but weren't created to be realistically like people, as the name of my production is Blobs, so the characters are quite blobby. I chose the name Blobs as the title of my production because it is short, simple, and memorable because it isn't spelled correctly, and I thought that this would appeal to my target audience. I put the narration at the end to sum up the events that happen within the production. Giving my characters voices helps them gain personality traits so my audience can relate to them better. The narration was aimed to sum up the moral value in case my audience didn't entirely understand it from watching the production. To get inspiration for my production, I looked at the work of professional animators to give myself some ideas on ways to produce my programme. In the end, I decided that the two productions that gave me the best ideas were Tim Burton's film Frankenweenie and Aardman's TV programme Timmy Time. Both of these productions used the stop-motion technique, but the inspiration that I mainly drew from them was their use of plasticine models for their characters. So similarities between my production and Tim Burton's Frankenweenie are the style, the models, and the main character. The style of Frankenweenie is a stop-motion animation, as well as it being a film for children, so my production fits in with this as well, except my technique isn't as smooth as Burton's, as he uses 1000 frames per second and I use 25. The models are also similar in the way that they are both made from plasticine and use armatures. However, Burton uses much more complex armatures for his characters, including the use of remote-controlled areas, such as the tail on his dog character. Here is an example of what his armatures look like. My armature was a simple design and looked similar to this one. So, although both productions use plasticine characters and armatures, you can definitely see the difference in the quality of the models and which production is made by the professional animator. Another similarity is the main characters. My main character is a young boy who learns a lesson about anti-bullying and does the right thing. The main character from Frankenweenie is also a young boy who learns a lesson in a different way, by making a mistake and learning from it rather than learning from other people's mistakes like mine does. So both projections have a main character that promotes moral values, but in different ways. The main differences in the two productions are the colour scheme, the storyline, and the setting. The colour scheme of my animation is bright primary colours which give a happy feel to the production, whereas Burton used a black and white colour scheme which cast a more horror-style feel in the production. I decided that Burton's use of black and white wasn't appropriate for my production and that bright colours would be better for a short animation as it is more eye-catching to my target audience. The storylines differ in both productions, as my storyline is about how to deal with anti-bullying and is set in a primary school and has a relatable location for my target audience. Burton's story is about a boy who loses his dog, so defies nature and brings it back to life. So the story is about how to let go of a loved pet, as the main character realises that his resurrected dog isn't happy after a while. So they both have moral values, but they have a lot of differences between them. The last main difference is the settings used in the productions. My setting was a primary school playground, which was my only location. I also used a green screen, so my set was appropriate for my target audience. Burton used many locations in his productions, such as a home, graveyard, and many others. This was appropriate for his production, as it was a lot longer than mine, as it was a film, as well as matching his storyline. Burton also used a 3-wall set for his locations, and all the props he needed were stationed within them. So our locations and set techniques are different. I also looked at Aardman's children's programme Timmy Time. The main inspirations that I drew from this production were the style, the models, and the colour scheme. This production is also stop-motion animation, which runs very smoothly and has a lot more movements in it than mine does. So the style of both our animations are the same. Another similarity in the two productions is the model. Both are made from plasticine and armatures. The look of the models in the Aardman production is more aesthetically pleasing than mine, as the plasticine work looks smoother and more detailed. However, I drew influence from Aardman by making my characters plasticine. The other main similarity between my production and Aardman's is the use of colour. Both our productions use bright colours that give a happier and more vibrant feel to the stories and events within the animation. The main differences between our productions are the audio and the storyline. My audio has characters that have voices and communicate in a language that children would understand just by hearing it.
Four Eyes, why do you need such stupid glasses? Yeah, Four Eyes, why can't you look normal, you weirdo? You're never gonna have friends if you look like that, weirdo. Yeah, come back when you look normal, Four Eyes.
Whereas Aardman's production uses the stereotypical noises of the animals, which are the characters in the production. So Aardman uses a more visual way of telling a story, as there is no dialogue that explains what is happening.
Hurt, 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 hurt.
I didn't use this technique as the length of my production doesn't really allow time for this, and I also wanted the message to be clear so there was more of a chance of my audience understanding my narrative. The other main difference is the storyline in both productions. Aardman's storyline is where the main character, Timmy, and his friend want to be firefighters, so they make a cardboard engine and dress up and to try to help people. Rather than helping people, they make problems worse by helping people that didn't need helping, and then having to make everything better at the end. So there are some similarities between the two narratives. However, my narrative is about problem solving, and Aardman's is about creating a problem and then making it better. So both teach a lesson, but are different in their approach. What I thought went well in my production was the models, parts of my stop-motion technique, lighting, the narrative, and my set. I think that my models were good because I made them to match the drawings in my pre-production, so using primary colours which children in my target audience will be used to and can identify with. I also used metal wire armatures, which were simple in design and helped my characters stand up and be easier to bend and move around, as well as keeping all of the plasticine together so that they didn't fall apart. The aesthetic qualities of my models I thought were good because all of the shapes were in proportion, as well as the facial features being up to the standard that I wanted. The parts of my stop-motion technique that I thought went well were in some scenes. In some scenes, such as this one, the animation technique is at its smoothest and the camera position doesn't change, so this means that I got the right number of frames per second for the scene to run this smoothly. It is similar here, where the camera pans to include other characters into the shot. So I think that this use of camera movement worked to make the production less static. So another aspect of my production that I thought was good was the lighting that I used. As I used studio lighting, it gave a sense of sunlight for my location of a school playground and helped keep the colours distinct and bright. It also helped with the shadows being irregular in the production by blending them out and helping the illusion that the models are in the set. I also think that my narrative was good, as it matched the brief by promoting moral values and having a male character as my main character doing the good deed. I think that I conveyed this relatively well in my production, even though I had to cut out a lot of my audio to fit the scenes and the 30 seconds of the production that my brief stated. The final aspect of my production that I thought was good was my set. I made the set myself in Photoshop because I had a location in mind and couldn't find an existing image to match it. I wanted a primary school playground because it is recognisable to children under 8 years old, so they would find the production easy to follow, as well as it being an appealing location, which was one of the requirements in my brief. The main improvements that I would make to my animation are to take more photos, change my green screen, not change my setup, and the editing of the audio. I think that I should have taken more photos when creating my production, as the movement of my characters can be quite jumpy, as is shown here. At some points, my models are moving too quickly. and at others, characters can change stance in a single frame. By taking more photos, the movement of my models would be less jumpy and more natural, as well as allowing me to speed up and slow down certain parts of my production. Like here, it would have been better to have a slow movement because the model looks too comical in a serious scene. And here, a quicker movement would have saved me some frames to add to other areas of my production, as well as suiting the audio effectively. The biggest improvement that I would make to my production is the green screening. As my models are primary colour and have green in them, I had to use different colours green screen. However, I chose a bad replacement as the fabric wasn't smooth like a green screen, and both the wall and table I used had more than one colour, so it was very difficult to edit, and I had to use a different key to chroma key in Premiere Pro, and had to use colour key instead. This would have worked if the wall wasn't a textured two-tone fabric, and the table wasn't a glosswood surface, as this meant I had to use more than one colour key for each frame. And as you can see, the result was of a bad quality. I also had issues with some of my setting up. Since I took pictures for different scenes on different occasions, I remade my set a few times so I had different lighting in certain areas, like in this scene change. Remaking my set also meant that my camera position wasn't consistent, so the shot size was also irregular, as well as making some of my pictures blurry. So in this scene here, the camera is in one position and changes before the end of the scene. The last improvement that I would make is the editing of my audio. I recorded too much audio for the production, so I had to cut large quantities of dialogue while keeping enough for the narrative to be clear. Even after this, the dialogue was too long, so I had to speed it up, which resulted in the voices becoming high-pitched. This wasn't the main issue, as it added a sweeter feel to the production. However, at certain points, such as here...
Excuse me, boys, but I'd like to talk to you about your behaviour towards Sophie. Oh, wow! I think you should get to know her before you make bad judgments.
The audio has been sped up too much, and it is hard to understand what is being said. So here again...
Excuse me, boys, but I'd like to talk to you about your behaviour towards Sophie. Oh, wow! I think you should get to know her before you make bad judgments.
The teacher speaks first, and third. There is a drastic change in the sound of the voice. From looking at my production and the technological devices that didn't go as well as I'd have liked, the main issues that I would improve if I were to remake the animation are my green screen techniques, the smoothness of my animation, and the editing of the dialogue audio. If I were to sort these problems out, then my set would be clear and not distorted as it is now, and my characters wouldn't be blurred as a result of the colour key, as well as having smoother movements when walking or generally moving, and having dialogue that is understandable and easier to decipher between the characters to know who is supposed to be talking. After explaining what I think is good and what needs improving in my stop-motion animation, it's good to get feedback off of other people to see what they think of my production. So to do this, I conducted an online survey of 10 questions, which asked people what they thought about the important elements in the technical and audience-based parts of my production, as well as the production overall. It's good to find out whether other people understand what my animation is about and what it is meant to achieve when shown to its target audience. So after watching my animation, 7 people who have also made stop-motion animations filled out my survey. The first thing that I wanted to know is whether other people can recognise my animation as a children's TV programme, so I know that I will have got enough of the right conventions within it or not. So my first question was, what genre do you think my animation is classified as? I got 2 different genres appear in response to this, which were comedy and children's programme. 6 out of 7 people recognised it as a children's programme, which means that I must have enough characteristics of that genre in my production. Only 2 people believed it to be a comedy, but I can see why they might think that, as the dialogue can seem comical because of the high-pitched tone. I also wanted to know what people liked best about the production, so my second question was, what was your favourite part of the animation? I received 4 answers for this, which was the voices of my characters, the movement of my models, the look of my models, and the moral value of the story. Out of these, the part that most people liked best about my animation was the voices. I think this is because of the comedic quality of them, as well as adding a sweeter tone to the production. I was curious to see what qualities other people think my animation has that make it part of the children's programme's genre. So I asked, how does it match or not match the genre? The positive feedback that I got for this question was that children can relate to the production, that the production teaches moral values, and the characters can be related to. So this means that the narrative of my animation was mostly understood and that other people think that I have achieved what I wanted to achieve in the making of the production. Only one person believed that my animation wasn't aimed at young children, but didn't give a reason why. The style of my production was a stop-motion animation, so I wanted to be sure that other people thought that my animation was the correct style. So my fourth question was, does my production fit the style of a stop-motion animation? This was a closed question, so people could only answer yes or no. All seven people answered yes to this question. So I know that I have used the right techniques for my style of animation. A very important part of my production is the narrative within it, and whether it is suited to my target audience. I asked, does the narrative in my production match the target audience of 3 to 8-year-olds? In what way does it do or not do this? From this, I learned that people think that it has a good message for the age group, that it is easy to follow and understand, teaches manners and good behaviour, and that it has an effective moral. So from this, I know that other people find my narrative suitable and recommend it for my target audience. One person said that children of this age would find it hard to understand. This could be as a result of the audio or the quick cutting scenes, but they didn't give a reason for this opinion. From this, I wanted to know what people thought about my main character. So my sixth question was, do you think that my main character was a good role model for my target audience? Why? There was some confusion for this question, as a few people responded saying that they didn't know who the main character was. This is understandable, as he isn't properly introduced. However, other people did recognise my main character and said that he is a good role model because he solves the problem and teaches a good moral. So from these responses, I believe that I have created a strong male lead character, as was required in my brief. Now knowing how successful or unsuccessful people think my animation is with my target audience, I need to know what they think about the technical side of the production. So my next question was, on a scale of 1 to 10, how successful do you think my stop-motion animation technique was? This was another closed question and allowed people to rate my technique out of 10. From this, I found that other people thought that my technique was quite successful, as I got rated 7s and 8s. This is different from my own opinion, but helpful to know that I don't need to improve my technique as much as I thought. Other technological devices were used in the production, so I asked, how well did I use my technological devices such as models, lighting, green screen, etc.? What could be improved? The positive responses that I received were that my production was a good standard, my models were well made, and I had a good setup and use of lighting. The improvements that were suggested were my green screen techniques and to make my stop motion smoother, so I can see that other people agree with some of the elements that I think I need improving in my production. Aesthetic qualities are also important for a good production, so my next question was, how did my animation look overall? What could be better? Most people said that the overall look was good, as well as giving improvements for the aesthetics. The improvements suggested were to have more frames per second to improve the smoothness of the stop motion, and to improve my green screen techniques. So people think that the look of my animation is effective, but sorting the technological issues would make it look even better. The final question that I wanted to ask was about whether people thought my idea was original. So I asked, do you think that my idea is original? If not, why not? Everyone believed that my idea was original, which means that my production is creative. Feedback for this was that my idea was eye-catching and engaging to the audience, as well as the audience learning from my story. After collecting opinions about my animation from other people, my action plan to improve my production is to remake it. Next time I would remove the green plasticine from my characters and replace it with a different colour, such as orange or purple. This would then allow me to use a proper green screen, so that when I overlay my set, there won't be any green screen in the background, so the technique would be improved. The next improvement that I would make is the amount of photos that I take. Taking more photos per second, such as 30 per second, should make the movement of my characters a lot smoother, as well as allowing me to speed up and slow down scenes more effectively. I would also change the amount of dialogue in my production to the bare minimum to improve the audio quality of the production and make it less comical, while still making the narrative clear. I would also have introductions for the characters by having their names appear on the screen as they appear in order to make the characters known and more relatable. With this, I would also make it clear who my main character is. To improve the aesthetics of the production, I would also make sure that my setup remains untouched so that my lighting remains the same throughout and the camera remains in the same place to get the angles and shots to remain consistent and not patchy. If I were to improve all of these elements of my production, I think that I could have an animation of near professional standard, which matches my brief and other people would want to watch. Now that I've finished my production and discussed what went well and what didn't go well, the last question is whether I would be suited to working in the media industry. From this experience, I think that I would be suited to it because I worked to a brief after making negotiations and included everything that was required within the brief. This would make bigger commissioners happy. I also had the production completed to the deadline set, so my timekeeping and organisational skills would also be suited to working in the media industry as a producer.